Hey everyone, Margarita here. I'm going to film this video today. This is going to be part 2 on the Brownstown, Michigan Police Department and the Monroe County Friend of the Court investigator, Kathryn Scott, being responsible for my 20-year-old daughter not being graduated from high school, where we are today in January 2026. So I'm going to read all of these reports. I have quite a few of them surrounding me, and I'm going to read them in order of the dates they were all printed and written. Because any idiot, once I read them all, you're going to be able to tell just by the things I say in each situation based on the date. And then I kind of repeat some of the same stuff. And then you can tell the very end result in what was written is fabricated and swayed to go how my deranged mother wanted it to go by inserting herself in this situation. I don't know if I'm actually going to be able to get through reading all of these because I might flip the fuck out and smack the phone across the room. So I'm not really sure if I can get through reading this, but I'm going to try to. So, I'm going to start with the fact that none of this should have ever been handed over to the Monroe County Friend of the Court. This was never a Friend of the Court situation. This was a kidnapping, and which then turned into a truancy, and it's Brownstown, Michigan's police department who are responsible for this matter because it was them who kept saying that I need to go to Friend of the Court to get my daughter back, when that's not at all what was going on. I was the only legal guardian. The only reason she was being hidden at my parents' house is because she had stolen my mortgage payment, and neither my police department in Flat Rock nor theirs in Brownstown were refusing to do anything about it or give her back to me. So I am going to start with because if you watch the last video that I made on this, I know I squeezed another video in there. But if you watch the video where I'm talking about the Brownstown, Michigan Police Department and Officer Wheeler, who is the only officer mentioned in these reports, even though there's several other officers involved in this, and especially because Brownstown alters their records and deletes their records from my reports or refuses to give me the information, I don't know who the other officers are. So this would actually require a federal investigation into the entire Brownstown, Michigan Police Department. And once I'm done reading all this, you would understand why the entire Monroe County Friend of the Court would need to be investigated, and so would Kathryn Scott. Now, because my mother has a history of kidnapping my oldest two children, this was not the first time this had happened. It happened in 2013 as well. And during that time, my mother had hired a attorney, one for each one of my children at that time. And I'm going to give the attorney's name because this lady wrote an entire false report on me in 2013. Even though this lady's not involved in the situation I'm about to talk about, I will come back and do a separate video on the 2013 escapade and the attorneys that were hired to print all this false documentation about me, and how my mother used my kids' dads had paid the attorneys to type up all this false bullshit and then take it to court to take my kids from me for them to hand them over to her. And at the root of all this, it was so that she could gain access to the rest of my stolen trust fund. She needed my children in her possession to do so. So all of these people are involved in this. These are Rico crimes. So the attorney who participated in all this back in 2013, her name is Jessica M. Richelo, and she works for Bruce and Associates PLC. And her attorney number is P73821. So that is the woman who participated in 2013. That caused catastrophic disaster in itself. But she is listed on some of these court documents for this incident here in 2021, which traveled into 2022 and into the beginning of 2023. Even though she was not a part of any of this, her name is on some of this. So again, at the root, Friend of the Court in Monroe should have never been involved. This was not a custody dispute. This was a stolen mortgage payment, and the amount of the money was $1,563. So that is a felony. Flat Rock, Michigan Police Department is responsible for not doing anything about it. So is Brownstown, Michigan Police Department. And then it turned into kidnapping and truancy. Because my daughter remained truant basically from that point forward. It was about 7 weeks into school, and then all the way continuing forward, and everybody pointing the finger at me like I'm the problem. And I do want to mention, during everything I'm about to say, there are at least 4 or 5 direct witnesses who can verify the facts in this situation and any of these time frames and any of these situations going on in the reality behind any of it. Because there's going to be a lot of delusion said when I start reading these reports, which is why I might just get pissed and smack the entire phone across the room. So, yeah, like I can't do this anymore. Like I really can't, because this has been going on for decades. It's literally destroyed every aspect of my life. And there's no way to fix the problems that have come out of this. There's no way to get back the lost time that I've lost. There is no putting anything back in any type of working order. My only option is to continue forward with what I have left after all this destruction, and make sure that nobody is ever allowed to touch my youngest child, who is almost 10. And it will stay that way. And we will not be going through any court system whatsoever for that child. That is also why he owns the other half of this home. So after all of this played out fraudulently, immediately after this all played out, I then forced my kid's dad to sign over his half of the home to my youngest child. And it is due to these crimes, these escapades, these lies, the delusions, the role my daughter played, the role my ex played, the problems that this has all created, the fallout of all of it, and what was going to happen going forward. On top of the fact that the house was never his work, it was not his money. His name didn't belong on it in the first place, and it was never supposed to be on it. The only reason it was on there is because I got injured giving birth to the youngest child and couldn't return to work properly. Otherwise, the difference would have been paid in cash by me, and the home would have had a very small mortgage, and it would have only been in my name. So those are the reasons why things have played out to where they are today. And like, really, I don't know if I can like read all this, because I really just might trip out. I might actually have to stop the video. I might throw the phone. I might break the phone. I'm not really sure. But if you were in my shoes, you would be doing the same goddamn thing. So all these idiots are responsible. Everybody I mentioned in the last video within the Brownstown, Michigan Police Department, everybody within the Monroe County front of the court. And at one point, I did have to go in person in the Monroe County front of the court, because this lady, Kathryn Scott, was playing all these games trying to say that she wasn't receiving these documents on numerous different sets of documents. And so I physically went in there and walked up to the window, and I could tell that every person in that office knew exactly who I was by the look that they all turned and gave me at the same time. So I'm already aware that my deranged mother was placing delusional phone calls to this office every step of the way, after she had manipulated the Brownstown Police Department into believing that she had custody and raised my older two kids. And then they're over here telling me I need to take this to front of the court, when it should have never been in front of the court's hands in the first place. So those people actually made numerous sets of documents disappear. And I can kind of prove it with some of what I have. And there is more proof, because Charmaine was also involved in all of this. And there's many situations along the way, including this one, where when I'm sending an email, I actually carbon copy Charmaine in a lot of these situations that are going on, because there are people who try to make documents disappear, messages disappear, emails disappear. They try to act like I didn't do this or that they never got this or that. So in a lot of situations, I have actually carbon copied her, and I'll talk about it when I get to those pages. So again, this all began about 7 weeks into school during the 2021 Ford gas bill. My mother has a history of inserting herself in things. When things happen, she physically inserts herself, or she places delusional phone calls to whatever agency, whatever's going on in whatever situation, calls to the top, gets whoever's in charge to believe her delusions, and she starts to destroy everything and tells people delusions about me and gets them to cause all these problems. And that's how this all started. So because this gas leak happened, had nothing to do with me, had nothing to do with her. It's just something that happened. And then she was able to manipulate the entire situation. And this is the fallout of all of that, because she's always been allowed to do this. So there's many situations along the way where she's been able to pull this off. Okay, so I'm going to start with, these are all emails for the most part. There is one court document, so I'll state that when it's the court document, the majorities these are emails, and the ending paper is the determination on who should have custody of my daughter in the end, and that's really where I might lose it. Okay, so this is dated, this is me sending the email. This is dated Tuesday, March 22nd, 2022 at 11:22 a.m. Now, this is me emailing Kathryn Scott at Monroe County Friend of the Court. And I had already spoken to her by phone, but I don't have any records of these. And at this point, I had already gone to the Brownstown, Michigan Police Department numerous times trying to get my daughter back in my possession. At this point, she had already been truant from school about 5 months. And I had numerous conversations with the Gibraltar Police Department because our school district is the Gibraltar School District. And I believe it was Officer Seifert who was handling this matter. And in the Gibraltar police reports, because I have copies of these and I have her attendance record and everything, it actually states that he was either leaving my kid's dad messages or he told him directly on the phone. I don't know if he actually spoke with him, but it states it in the police report that he told him that he's to return my daughter to me if he cannot get her to school, because he continued to not bring her and he was aware that that's where my daughter was. Because they don't mention anything about my parents in Brownstown Police Department and the kidnapping. They didn't mention anything like that. They just acted like it was a problem between me and the father, and it wasn't. It was my mother stirring up all the problems, my daughter learning how to manipulate, play the games, and then my ex just believing whatever delusions, living in his own little world, not reality. So in there, it actually states that if he cannot get her to school, they want him to return her to me so that she can get to school, because I've been the one who's gotten her to school her entire life, and there's never been a problem prior. So I forgot to mention that in the last video, but it does state that in the Gibraltar police report. And everything I'm reading, minus these emails, because this is my direct email, it might even be public record because it's within the Monroe County court case. It should be. Everything is, you can request all this via FOIA request. So anybody can do that. So this isn't just some secret. But so I'm going to start this first email that I do have between her. So this is the first actual documentation I could find. I have so much paperwork. I have literally 2 feet stacked up full of crimes, documents, and paperwork. And my mother's at the root of all of it. She has manipulated, inserted herself, and or caused everything directly. And that's how much bullshit and chaos and crimes have gone on for all these years. That it took me quite a while to dig through and find every piece of everything I need for every situation. And then I'm making the videos. So then I pull each thing to make the videos, and it doesn't really get put back in order because I'm doing numerous things with all of these different sets of paperwork. So everything gets very confusing as well with how much that there is. I do have a file cabinet, but there's just so much in it. And I even cleaned it completely out at one point, and it's filled all the way back up. So it's absurd. These are all crimes. These are Rico crimes. So this is March 22nd. I tell Kathryn Scott that per our conversation last week, I am sending you this email to formally inform you that my daughter's father has been illegally keeping my daughter from me. He has had her since the end of October 2021 due to a mix of the gas leak caused by Ford Motor Company, by my house, and my delusional mother kidnapping my daughter first, and the Brownstown Police Department refusing to return her, believing she has custody of my daughter. This all came shortly after my daughter stole $1,563 from me in cash, and the Flat Rock Police Department refusing to take me seriously due to my mother's delusional phone calls to them for the past 21 years. They didn't believe I had that type of money. Apparently, she's been telling everybody that other people pay my bills and this isn't my house, which has never been true. So that's what's actually going on here. And this starts off kind of mild between her and I. And then as time goes on and as my mother's calling and inserting herself, it gets more intense and more delusional, because then what she's writing becomes my mother's delusions, as she continues to speak with her, because then my mother will repeatedly place the delusional phone calls. Once she gets somebody involved, she'll repeatedly call back and then pump it up and pump it up and pump it up and up and up and up until it goes her way. And that's what's happened 100% of every incident that's ever happened in the last 20 some years, 30 some years. Okay, so this is the beginning where it's all pretty mild. I initially sent this email. It looks like I sent it 5 or 6 days earlier, but then I realized it didn't go through, and it must have been for a good reason, because then I had received a letter from Wayne County Friend of the Court the day before I sent this, stating that, because I was trying to get child support for my youngest child, and it stated that he was not able to be served. And so I attached a picture of it with this email and sent it to Monroe County, because I lived in Monroe County. I owned a house in Monroe County when the order for child support and custody was made for my daughter originally back in 2005 when she was born. But I've lived in Wayne County all these other years. So technically, and because my daughter was almost 18, Monroe wasn't wanting to help with the child support and there wasn't a problem with custody. There needed to be child support, and they weren't willing to try to help with it because she was almost 18. None of us has anything to do with Monroe County. They wanted me to go to Wayne County, and that's how it ended up getting filed with Wayne County. But then he was never able to be delivered. He intentionally avoided getting served. He stated from the other side of the door that he had COVID, which was a lie. And then he was able to avoid ever getting served. But with where we are today and how this is all played out, we're going to keep that child out of the support system for numerous reasons. Our lives are in danger. If we were to do that, it would cause more catastrophic disaster. My mother would be able to repeatedly insert herself, trying to get her claws into that child. In the end, it would eventually kill him because the people around us are ignorant and they pretend we don't actually have a medical condition and we're never injured. So in the end, it would lead to him losing his life. So we will continue to keep this out of the court system. And there still is no child support or anything, and I'm just going to keep it that way. So now it goes on saying that like the different amounts that I've had to pay for that child and why I filed for child support, and that I paid for 100% of his treatment out of pocket, and he's never covered anything toward it. And then I'm paying at this point, now I'm paying a household employee, which I'd had almost a year at that point. And then she's also helped watching that child. So I basically state that all in one paragraph. And then I state that Charmaine has been involved. At this point, it had been a little over 2 years, due to the high level of crimes being committed against me and authorities refusing to help because they're actually involved in the crimes. And that on paper, my ex actually has like a certain amount of parenting time, which I believe is like every weekend or something with my daughter. And he had never raised her. He wasn't even a part of her life until she was almost 10. He only picked her up a couple times a year. I raised my older 2 kids by myself. And that he had never like abided by the parenting time rule that was actually in our court order all those years, because it was written in 2005. So, and it goes on to say at the end of 2013, I was forced to be with him to work things out because of all of the crimes and harassment, and my delusional mother was partaking in against me with the authorities, refusing to listen to me, and they're participating in the crimes, and they're only helping her. And then I said I gave birth to a second mutual child in 2016, became permanently brain damaged, which was the beginning of a very large-scale cover-up. 2 years later, the baby and I overloaded with carbon monoxide. We didn't initially understand what was wrong because it was originally a cover-up at the hospital, and then separately, the place that caused it covered it up. And then from there, we basically spent 3 years near death once we completely overloaded with it. And that it was me still keeping the household running, paying all the bills, and keeping my kids in school and maintaining everything during all of this time when I was fighting for my life, completely incapacitated, with the help of my oldest child, who was, I think, 15 at the time, or maybe he was 15 or 16. And he was also suspended from school for a long period of time as well. So it happened like right at the right time. So my daughter was not doing any of the stuff like within the household at that time either. So this goes on to say that in November of 2020, that Charmaine had made an executive decision to tell him to move out of my home. Once she started to see what was actually going on inside my home, she could clearly see he was a huge part of the problem, and he moved out the next day. He had not paid anything toward my youngest the entire time, or hadn't paid anything at all toward anything really like the entire time. And so all the way from, so it was like an entire year where my daughter did not visit him except for like a few times, and she remained in my house the way she had her entire life that whole time. And then I talk about how I hired the household employee who was at my house 3 to 5 days a week or 3 to 5 nights a week, and her mother was here frequently as well. And they're direct witnesses to everything that had gone on. She ended up working for me from April of 2021 all the way, it was like March or April 2021, and all the way to till I moved to my house in Ohio, which was, I think she worked for me all the way through the end of July 2022. And her mother was here with her regularly during all that time. So they can speak on the fact that there was no problem with my daughter or our relationship or her living here with me, and all these other malicious people inserting themselves in our lives and spinning delusions and brainwashing and causing all these problems. They're direct witnesses to all this. They were directly under my roof. They spent many nights here. So they're very credible witnesses. I mean, there's several other people who can verify this. They're not the only ones. But then it goes on to say that she had missed half the school year at this point. He did not raise any of his kids, nor does he have the ability to parent properly. He parties way too much to ever be able to get up early enough in the morning to drive her to school before he has to be to work. And then he tried to blame it on his mom, who lived 2 doors down from him, after he told me that I needed to drop her from school and sign off so she does not have to finish. My daughter's truancy officer, Mr. Sievert, contacted me 2 weeks ago trying to charge me with truancy when no one will return my daughter. All of the local police departments are involved in not returning her, while my delusional mother continues to commit crimes against me. All the local police departments believe that I have a drug problem and a mental disorder due to my delusional mother's decades of phone calls, none of which has ever been true. And then it says, this past Sunday, he showed up to drop off our youngest child. He only keeps him Saturday nights and brings him back on Sunday. My youngest and I have a severe injury and will never be able to live a normal life due to our condition. He is homeschooled by me. And I've also been self-employed since 2007, so I'm able to keep things running efficiently due to the flexibility that I have and the control that I have over everything I'm running and how I make my money. And so he has no choice but to bring him back for school because he doesn't have the ability to homeschool him, nor does he know how to manage money to be able to like do what I do, basically. And all the way, he actually never even left with that child. My child stayed homebound the first like 5.5 years of his life. He never even left with his dad until the gas leak. So he didn't start spending Saturday night to Sunday with him until it was the 3rd week of October 2021, the very first time he ever went overnight with him. That in his entire life leading up to that, so the first 5.5 years, he was here with me. He stayed homebound with me his entire life. So then it goes on to say that he showed up on Sunday at my house with my youngest, looking like he'd been awake all night doing cocaine. This is during the time he was dating this girl who got a $120,000 divorce settlement from her ex-husband, and they basically put it all up their noses. And then he began digging through my purse for my prescribed Xanax, and pretty sure he took some of it. Due to the gas leak caused by Ford and the city not cleaning it up properly, we were living with more symptoms than we were already living with continuously, and we were living on borrowed time. I had been making arrangements to move us to Lucas County. And as the weather was getting warmer, the symptoms were becoming worse because the gas particles, it was all throughout the sewer system and in the waterways. That's where it all flushed to. So it was rising up higher and higher the warmer it was getting. And the colder it was staying lower and lower. So it was easier to get from point A to point B when it was colder. But because this was the end of March, it's rising up higher and higher. And we were literally living on borrowed time because they did not flush. They only flushed away like 90% of it, 85 to 90% of it. And then they called it all clear, which was not all clear. We literally had to have it all clear. The problem with this is our brain tissue is open. So all particles, chemicals, gases, toxins, everything floods right through. I talk about this in all my other videos. There's videos where I talk about the blood-brain barrier and the brain injuries and what's all going on regarding that. So you can go to that section where I talk about all that if you're confused about what I'm talking about when I say we're in a life-threatening medical emergency and what's actually going on with us during all of this. So there's other videos that describe all of this. This is not a mental disorder. This is a serious physical injury. And the reason we were left untreated to that degree is because of my mother making sure we did not receive treatment within the traditional medical system when it became a medical emergency. She was inserting herself, pulling people aside, and getting others to enter false information into our medical file. This is why we never received treatment and how we ended up at a private facility self-paying. That's how all that happened. And at the root was so I wouldn't survive, so then she would be able to gain access to the rest of the stolen trust fund. So that's what's actually at the root of all of that and why we were forced home. So during all this, I'm making plans to like get us moved to Lucas County. And I'm telling this all to this woman, which actually I didn't realize in the moment, but I already had a court order that permitted me to take my daughter to and move to Lucas County if I so chose, because this was not the first time I had worked down in Ohio. I'd worked down there numerous times when she was much younger. I already had a court order I didn't need permission from the court to take her out of state or be down there, live down there, or work down there because I already did when she was younger. So I didn't realize that because I was living in so much chaos, but I remembered like after they brought it up. So I am telling her about that in this paper, and then the judge eventually brought that up. And then I'm talking about how the gas particles are everywhere within a 30 to 50 mile radius of Flat Rock and Lake Erie, where everything has been flushed, and they're lying to the public, they're lying to everybody in the area and on the news that this is contained to a small area and everything's going to be fine and it's all flushed away and it's all clear, and it's not. And at this point, I was spending $600 per week to remove just small amounts of what we were taking in just to keep us semi-okay and a little bit. We were still sliding backwards, but we were just like staying semi-okay during this by me treating twice a week and him treating once a week just to remain in this home. But we couldn't like have quality of life or go out and about and go places. I was only going to work and back the few times that I was, and then I was going to the treatment center and back, and that was it. We couldn't do anything else. We literally had to get ourselves out of here until it was all 100% clear, which then took about 2 years. And I knew that in advance. I could tell by how quickly it was clearing from the rain that it was going to take about 2 years, and I was correct. It was about 2 years. Then I talk about like how, that legal amount, they consider the EPA is all clear, and the legal amount, we still couldn't have that legal amount. But nobody was listening to what I was saying. They all believed it to be a mental disorder and a drug problem and a joke because my mother is placing all these delusional phone calls about it to the city, to the top of Ford, and to the numerous police departments, and then eventually to the Monroe County friend of the court. So then I go on the last paragraph and say where it says my daughter's dad said that she's the one being charged with truancy. And then I reached out to the court, and when I talked to the court, they said no child's ever charged with truancy. It's the parent who's charged. That's when I told Officer Seaver, I said, you're not charging me with that. I can't get her back. These are crimes. This is a kidnapping. There's many crimes going on. I have no way to get her back. If you're not going to make Brownstown Police give her back, or you're not going to go physically pick her up when I have the legal papers and the legal documents and the legal custody, and nobody will give her back to me because everybody's playing games, pointing fingers, and the police are involved in the crimes, then you're not charging me with anything. So he eventually agreed to charge the dad, is what happened. So that was from that email, and then it goes on to May 5th, 2022, where I send another email, and it says something about our court date being the next day. And I said, I just want to give you a heads up that I made another police report in Brownstown about my parents' repeated kidnapping of my daughter on Sunday, April 3rd, 2022. And the initial report was made at the end of October 2021. And I showed that video, I believe it was March or April of 2025 on my YouTube channel is when I released it. It's Brownstown Police video number 2. So I showed the body cam footage of all that there, and I mentioned that in the last video as well. But that's where this all began, third week of October 2021. And I did that at the time because the dad then left and went out of town, just going about doing whatever he wants, and then just left her with my parents so he can do whatever he wants because he's not an actual parent, never has been. So that's what he was doing. And I knew that that's where she was at, and she's not allowed over there. And at this point, I'm still the only legal guardian. So here I go back to Brownstown. I try to get her back in my custody. And that's where Officer Wheeler and many other officers decided they're just not going to do anything about it. And they're going to sit there and stare at us like we're idiots for an hour in the lobby. And I had my witness with me, who'd been my employee for over like a year at this point. And then she had also witnessed the entire thing play out, and she witnessed my attempted murder. So we were there on all of those matters. But they did nothing about it. So I'm writing and I'm telling Kathryn Scott all this at front of the court. And then I state that he received the letter from the friend of the court stating he's in violation of the custody, and that my daughter had brought the court paperwork to my delusional mother to fill out. This is supposed to be, the dad is supposed to fill it out. There's not any third parties. This is supposed to be between the parents. So the court paperwork was then taken by my daughter and brought to my mother. And then my mother was coercing her into calling Charmaine and trying to get information out of her to fill out the paperwork fraudulently, trying to get her to state that I have a bunch of mental conditions that I don't have, specifically the mental condition that she actually does have, Munchausen by proxy. And Charmaine refused to give them anything. So then Officer Wheeler claimed to take the report and investigate the situation, and this did not happen. His idea of investigating was calling my delusional mother to confirm that the false reports she has been calling the same police department with for decades. He even called Charmaine and admitted that the claims/crimes that I came there to report had indeed been repeatedly reported. I went to the police station with my daughter's birth certificate, friend of the court order, and the email stating the father's in violation of custody, and the court letter stating Monroe County friend of the court would be taking action in 21 days, and the court summons that was never delivered to get the child support for my youngest child. And then it goes on to say the Brownstown police still believe that my parents raised and have custody of my daughter without showing any type of proof or paperwork. They also believe my parents have custody of her due to me having a mental disorder and a drug problem, neither of which was ever true. I even explained that she is currently truant in my school district, which is the Gibraltar School District, and the father's being charged. They believe the delusion still refused to return her, even with the father out of town. And the reason that my daughter ended up with her father in the first place was because the Brownstown police, numerous of them, refused to return her the third week of October 2021. Then it goes on to say how my daughter knows how to manipulate and play mind games because she learned this from my mother long term when she was a younger child and then growing up. And then I completely removed my two older kids from ever being able to go over there in 2013. They were only limitedly allowed to go over there from time to time after this, and my youngest has never been allowed to go over there. And then my daughter has manipulated every angle to get her way. This all began right after she stole my $1,563 mortgage payment on my way to the bank to pay it, and then the bank happened to be closed. I was in Ohio when this happened, and then I got back to Flat Rock, which is where I realized it was missing at the end of October 2021. And then my narcissistic mother used the Ford gas leak to blow apart our lives some more while we were already suffering and still under treatment for the initial gas poisoning. And then it says that if the court needs to contact Charmaine, who's been involved for over 2 years, I'm willing to let her speak. She has watched the crimes, lies, delusions, manipulation play out in real time. No one knows the situation better than her. Here's her name and phone number. And I'm also wondering, if it's possible to add the younger child to the child support case and this and that. Nothing ever came of that. I'm just going to kind of leave it at that because we're never going to move forward with that. And I promise you, it's still not going to happen, even if somebody in this world thinks that they're going to insert themselves or tries to make that happen. Like from now until he's 18 in the next 8 years, you will never find me. I promise you. I will disappear so fast, nobody will ever find me because I know they use my kids to create these problems, take them from me, use the courts, and that's how all this destruction and disaster is able to keep going and going and going. It goes rounds and rounds and rounds, and it never stops. And here we are, 23 and a half years later, here we are still going. So I promise you, if any of you watching this video think you're going to get any slick, smart ideas, it's not going to fucking work. So anyway, this is the first court document. Here's an actual court document because I'm objecting to the referee's recommended order, which it was some old guy who, I don't even have it. I can't find the paper, but he wrote some delusional order that basically made it look like me and the dad are playing games and I need to supervise parenting because I'm just this problem. Not the parent who's raised everybody and has done all the work 100% on my own. And even when the dad was in my household, the only thing he's doing is creating more problems. So that's why I filed this paper and chucked the referee order out the window. So I don't even know, maybe I literally chucked it out the window because I can't find it. I don't have it. This is 5/27 of 2022. And so this is the actual court order, but then I attached like the additional, I just put C attached. So then I wrote everything out for this court petition regarding my daughter. And it says, I'm objecting to the recommended court order entered on May 10th, 2022 regarding my daughter. And it's clear the referee did not view any of the correspondence or investigate any of the criminal activity in this situation. He was also under the impression that the father and I had recently separated. And that my daughter went to go live with her father, and that he has an active role in raising her all of these years, which is far from reality. From the time my daughter was born to the end of 2013, she resided only with me and only seen her father a few times per year. We were not together the entire time. 2013 is when the most recent court order for parenting time regarding my daughter was entered. The court orders entered in 2013 were fraudulent and not submitted by my ex. None of these statements made about me at that time were true, and this was all the work of my delusional mother who had been getting away with committing felonies for decades. He was told by my delusional mother that he was signing off on the current and back child support owed on my daughter at that time. He signed the fraudulent documents without reading any of it, claiming I am a drug addict. The delusional woman has been calling all the local police departments, because at this point, it was 21 years that she had been placing these delusional phone calls. So now it's been more years, claiming to have custody of my daughter and my oldest child, who is now an adult. My ex had no active role in my daughter's life at the time and had the custody parenting time modified so that he could give my daughter to my parents so they could have parenting time. But it was really so my mother could gain access to the stolen missing trust fund, because she needs my kids in her possession to do that. And he has never taken her any of the weekends that he was scheduled to. He only turned her over to my parents to continue playing my mother's delusional narcissistic games. This went on for a few months until the end of 2013, when we were basically forced to work together to shut it all down. And this was the only way to make it all stop and make the abuse and my mother's crime stop and make the chaos stop, so I could begin to pick up some pieces of my life, because this had destroyed several businesses, completely financially wiped me out. I had to buy a new car, get a new place to live. I had enough money to purchase a house with cash, and it completely wiped me out because it went on for almost 6 months. So that was the only way to make it stop. She just kept it on going and going, and all these police departments, including Brownstown, everybody's helping her do this, and the court and everybody she hired and paid. So from that point on, he stopped bringing her to my parents' house, because then he decided to work with me. And it seemed like it was my only option at that point. This is how all this began. I would have never agreed to do any of this or enter into a relationship with somebody doing any of this, or there's so much to it. I would have never done that. That was a forced situation. I remained raising her and my oldest together, taking care of all of the responsibilities. He has never played an active parent role in her life whatsoever. I had driven them to and from school their entire lives and continued to do so. He never took care of any of these responsibilities, nor was he paying any money toward the household bills until sometime in 2015. In 2016, I gave birth while suffering from carbon monoxide poisoning, where we were severely deprived of oxygen to the brain, leaving us with permanent brain damage. Our injuries were an attempted cover-up, and we were left without treatment, not knowing what was wrong. I returned to the place that I was temporarily working at that caused the injury at the end of 2016. During this time, my ex did not take over any parenting responsibilities with my daughter or help with the new baby. He continued on with his party lifestyle as if I did not have self-employment to get back to and business to be ran. I slowly was being poisoned each weekend. I stayed stuck working in the temporary restaurant that I was never supposed to be at. I finally overloaded with the carbon monoxide 14 months of weekends later. At the same time, I was sliding downhill, overloading with the gas, not knowing what was wrong. And at the same time, the baby was also sliding downhill from birth on, still us not knowing what was wrong. But it was also because we could not have like the normal legal amounts of carbon monoxide. Neither one of us could from birth on. And it was even more confusing because we were then removed from the place causing the carbon monoxide. I never even returned to the place until he was 7 months old, and still just never returned to normal. We both continued to get worse. So we did not know what was wrong. Then the next paragraph, it says, on January 11th, 2018, I was stuck in a severe state of emergency with massive brain swelling and 70 severe symptoms at once. On January 23rd, 2018, when I had a severe brain swelling episode, the carbon monoxide broke through the blood-brain barrier and flooded my entire system, leaving me unconscious in my bed. I was actually dead in my bed for 4 hours is what happened. I came back without medical intervention on my own. No one in my home called 911. I lost the ability to communicate properly for several years and was then left without treatment again due to my delusional mother working in the medical system for 45 years. She inserted herself to make sure that we did not receive treatment in an extreme medical emergency. I spent 34 and a half months with the left side of my brain sagging and continuously swelling with heavy neurotoxicity, so did my youngest child. We did not become semi-okay until Thanksgiving of 2020. This was after I spent over $100,000 out of pocket at a private treatment center, and my private insurance had been billed over $1 million at that point. And at this point, when I'm writing this in 2022, we were still under, it was 2 days a week for me, one for him at this point, and we had just a few months prior stopped doing daily treatment. But we also had the home chamber as well that we were working with and filling in the blanks with the home chamber. until the gas leak happened because we couldn't run it during the gas leak. It says we are still under treatment to this day, and we will always need maintenance treatments for life to maintain some quality of life. We had absolutely no quality of life whatsoever for those 34 and a half months until my youngest child was nearly 5 years old. My ex did not even attempt to try to help get us treatment, even when I couldn't stand up. I remained completely incapacitated while still maintaining my household minimally in an extreme state of suffocation and brain swelling. I still managed to get my oldest two kids to school, and my ex continued on with his life, partying almost nightly, acting as if his youngest child and I were not at home fighting for our lives for years. During this time, my ex still had no active parenting role in my daughter's life. In the beginning of 2020, I finally got to a point where I could incorporate bringing Charmaine in once a week, and I did this for several reasons. And it was so that a professional could see and document the ongoing crimes that my mother was at the root of, and she can watch it play out in real time. And the other reason was because my ex had been acting like there was no severe medical emergency, acting like we weren't under daily treatment for all those years, acting like this is not what was going on, and kept continuing on with his life. And then he kept continuing on arguing with me regularly and partying when I couldn't tolerate sound. I was extremely unwell and weak, suffering 50, 60 severe symptoms at once. And Charmaine could clearly see that he was the problem within the household, and finally made an executive decision to tell him to move out in November of 2020. She could see some of my daughter's behavior was coming from watching him act that way toward me during this entire time. From November 2020 on, after he moved out of my home, my daughter and then obviously my youngest child, they remained residing with me just as she had done her entire life. From November 2020 till October 2021, once the gas leak happened. And my daughter did not visit him except for a few times. For the last several years, my delusional mother's crimes became more apparent. My daughter has not been allowed to have contact with my mother. It is a sticky situation because my dad was pretty much her stand-in father most of her life, and my parents are still married, although we kept maintaining a separate relationship, and my dad was allowed to come to my homes and my mother was not. And so she had limited contact with her because sometimes my dad would take her over there, even though I kept repeatedly telling him she's not allowed at your house with your wife. And I do refer to my mother as his wife quite a few times. So that's who that is. It's not a stepmother. Um, and then it goes on and says, at the end of August 2021, Ford Motor Company spilled 15,000 gallons of gasoline into our sewer system. And at this point, my youngest child and I had been homebound for the previous 3 years and had just gotten to barely pick up a few pieces of our daily lives. We cannot have any amounts of gases due to our previous severe injury. The severity of the injuries were multiplied due to my delusional mother working in the medical system, preventing us from receiving any treatment. My delusional mother used Ford's gas leak to narcissistically blow apart our lives some more, as she had a repeated history of doing. At first, it was believed that the gas was contained when that was never true. It was flushed 50 to 100 miles out, causing us to hop hotels 11 times in 2 months. We ended up having to be an hour south of our home in order to not overload with the gases. We had to be completely removed from the area for an extended period of time because it was enough gas to kill us in just one trip home. My delusional mother used this incident to insert herself into my daughter's life and begin more brainwashing. About a week prior to the gas leak happening, my daughter began demanding to go back to school in person. She had been online for almost 2 years already. I preferred to keep her online due to mine and my son's injuries and the daily treatment I was still going through. That is what worked best to keep my household running efficiently. I also hired a household employee over a year ago to help me keep things running smoothly, as sometimes I have re-exposures and I'm not always okay. I also have limited functioning. My limited functioning is better than most people's 100% functioning because I was very high functioning prior to becoming permanently injured. My employee and her mother were present in my home when my daughter manipulated my dad into forcing me to put her back in school in person. During those 2 months when I was gone from my home, which was an extreme life-threatening emergency, I could not come anywhere near my home and the 30 to 50 miles surrounding, depending on like the time frame, because there was a lot of flushing going on as well. So it depends on like the area, how far out we were and such. So it kind of shifted, and as more precipitation happened, that window slowly closed in, like became a smaller amount of miles surrounding my home that I could eventually get a little bit closer without as many problems or without it being life threatening. But it did take 2 years to fully clear. So then it said that she needed to be driven to school because she forced me to let her go in person, which I did, and now I've got witnesses to all of this. And then that's where my household employee was then taking her to school. And my delusional mother inserted herself at some point and began to take my daughter to school once my employee, because a lot of the work she was doing was within my home, and we were also working on the home. So she actually had to go get a regular job. And then when I returned home, she just kept her regular job, and she also worked for me. Because we were told initially this was only going to last a few weeks, and it turned into months, and then it turned into years. So she went and got a job and came back and worked for me 2 months later and just started staying in my home. So during that time when she was no longer at the hotel with us, and then I didn't have anybody to take my daughter to school, that's where I left my daughter with her dad, and he was supposed to be getting her to school. But then somehow she ended up at my parents' house during the third week of October when the police refused to return her to me, and that's where my mother started taking her to school. And then she was waiting to insert herself in all this. That's where she began repeating delusions to my daughter, brainwashing her, and the delusions come out of her mouth. And so we have Charmaine as a direct witness that this has happened many different times over the years. Ooh, excuse me. And she screams the delusions my mother repeats to her. She screams them at me, and so do several other family members. She's able to make the delusions come out of other people's mouths. It said my daughter had been coming down to Ohio and staying at the hotel and watching her younger brother during the gas leak on the weekend, and so that way I could still work. And then the lady who was working for me on her 2 days off, she was also coming down to Ohio and just would stay at the hotel so I could work. And that's how I went about things during the time I was gone. So then it talks about the stolen mortgage payment, and she wasn't trying to face any consequences, so she began manipulating the situation also, and that she's hiding behind my delusional mother, who'd been telling the Brownstown police she had custody of her and raised her, and they believed the delusions, no questions asked, and refused to return her to me. I made several police reports with Brownstown since October 2021, but they refused to take them because they believe my mother has custody. And Charmaine has witnessed the kidnapping of my daughter by my parents at the end of October 2021 as well. She is aware my mother's very dangerous and also poisons batches of food. She was able to get my dad to bring my daughter to her father just to get her away from my mother. She was at least able to convince my dad that he needs to at least drop her off with her dad to get her away from my mother at this point. And that's how she ended up at her dad's house. So then my delusional mother also called to the top of Ford to make sure they thought I had a severe mental disorder and a drug problem and not a severe medical condition, and that we are still under treatment for. And from that point forward, Ford and the city of Flat Rock believed the delusions and cut off our hotel, forcing us home to live in the gas, which was overloading in our system, and we're living with brain bleeding because those particular particles cause brain bleeding. It irritates the open part of our brain tissue, and it's causing brain bleeding and it dripping out our ears. So that's how we were forced to live until I got enough money to buy the other house, which I didn't buy until June of 2022. So from November 2021 to June 2022, we were forced living in the clearest room, which was the room behind me, closest to the floor where the particles were the lowest, and our brains were bleeding. Mine significantly more because I had to get to work to be able to get some money to keep everything running. And then we did have to go to the treatment center to begin clearing what we were taking in as well. So my son just stayed completely homebound during that entire time, and except for going to treatment and back, and then I would just go to work and back and to treatment and back, and that's it. So let's see. And then it talks about how they did another flush in March of 2022 after receiving many angry phone calls from me because they didn't believe that there was anything wrong and that it's all clear. And I'm telling them, like, no, it's not. I don't need somebody to test. I don't need a detector or a tester of any kind. I don't need the EPA. My brain tissue is wide open. I can tell you where the particles are. I can tell you how heavy it is and how bad it is. So they kept just trying to say that it was all clear. And I'm like, no, it's not. And after many phone calls, they eventually did one more flush. It did make a significant difference, but it was still a very severe situation. It still took an additional over a year from that point to begin to clear. Once it was finally clear, it was maybe 14 months from there before it was fully clear. And that was done with natural precipitation. If they had not done that additional flush, I don't believe we would have been alive. Because there was a situation, they talked about it on the news in February 2022. They acted like a fisherman had found some gas or some oil in the nearby Huron River, and that's not what that was. That was actually the gas spill from 5, 6 months prior, and that they had not cleaned it up all the way. That's what he had actually found, and they lied on the news, and they had the mayor talking about, oh, this came from some underground storage tank that's like 100 years old, and no, it was the original gas bill is what it was, and I'm the only person who knows that. So we live in the shadiest city, and every person who works for the city and the police in Flat Rock, Michigan is a piece of shit. So I tell them basically all of this in this whole report, and it talks about how my daughter so desperately wanted to go to school in person for that past school year that that's where she should have been. And the second she wanted to stay at his house, he inherited that responsibility of taking her to school because that's what she wanted to do. And because he didn't raise any of his 4 kids and has no experience taking care of them or having anything to do with school, he's painting the picture as if I'm just a shitty parent who won't let the daughter do online school, when that is how I had everything structured in the first place. And now he's being charged with truancy in the Gibraltar School District where I reside because he does not know how to parent and did not take her to school. And then also I mentioned, like, how can a delusional woman who claims to have custody of my daughter live in Brownstown when my daughter is in the Gibraltar School District where my actual house is? That doesn't make any sense. And she's been here for years. This has been her legal address for 8.5 years now. This entire situation is nothing but a bunch of narcissistic mind games being played by master manipulators. The police departments and courts are involved in the delusions and crimes being committed against me. I have been my daughter's only parent her entire life. It would be an extreme injustice for the father to be given custody. With me having visitation after everything that has happened, and if he was truly exercising his right to be a parent, why was he never a parent in the past all these other years? There's no argument over our mutual child who has a severe medical condition with me because he requires a lot of money out of pocket to stay alive in treatments and is homeschooled due to that, and he doesn't have the ability to do any of that. So he only sees them for one 24-hour period per week and does not pay anything out of pocket toward medical expenses or child support. So that is just one situation, and I knew this was going to take forever for me to read all this when I started reading through it earlier. But then I'm going to go to, so I'm trying to read this in order. The next one is Thursday, August 11, 2022 at 4:22 p.m. I say, hello, Miss Scott. I am emailing you today to let you know that I received the investigation paperwork 3 days ago. Currently working on getting this packet returned to you, and should have it to you by tomorrow, but I'm in the process of transitioning into the new home that I purchased in Lucas County, Ohio. My mail is still going to my main address, and we weren't planning on changing our address. That's where everything's going to continue to go. But there were many repairs that needed to be done on the home that I purchased to make it livable and safe for us due to our condition. And I'm dealing with a lot of very extreme issues on top of our chronic condition, and fighting through the remnants of the Ford gas leak, which we're having to drive through, back and forth through it. And it's causing some problems there. And then we're also still treating, having to drive pretty far away to get to the treatment center. That had completely disrupted that past year of our lives after everything we had already been through. And the root reason for this whole investigation is due to the Ford gas leak and my delusional mother kidnapping, at this point, my 17-year-old daughter. During it, the police repeatedly refused to step in and return my daughter after many in-person reports, believing my parents have always had custody of her and my oldest child for decades. This all began when my daughter stole my mortgage payment on the way to the bank to pay it, and there's actually a repeated history of my delusional mother kidnapping my oldest 2 kids and getting away with it. In the meantime, my daughter missed the entire year of school due to all of these games and delusions and crimes. She remained truant in my school district the entire year, and no one would return my daughter. I am the only parent and legal guardian she has ever had. The father was charged with truancy over this in the Gibraltar School District and was able to shift the blame onto me without me being present or the truth being presented to the court. The case ended up being dismissed because he was able to make them believe that I was at fault and I just won't let her go online. Many crimes have been committed against me because of all the lies and delusions going on between malicious family members, each having their own agenda against me, and the local police departments as well. This is also the reason for this investigation and the court situation, because this should have never landed within front of the court. When this is all said and done, this is technically an FBI situation regarding my mother's decades of crimes, and it's only a matter of time before she is apprehended. At this point, I was already trying to report my mother's decades of crimes to the FBI and the higher up agencies. I was already doing this during 2022. There is Charmaine, who's been involved for the past 2.5 years at this point. She's a key witness to every crime and every event that has occurred since bringing her in. The judge stated that he would like her to submit a letter on a letterhead about certain things. And then I said, the situation is so extreme and very long term, she's not going to be able to put all of that in a letter. And that she's requesting that you speak with her over the phone. Here's her name and phone number. Nobody ever spoke with her. And then, okay, so then these are all emails, like literally. So then the next email says, this is where we go back and forth numerous times, where Charmaine was directed to send over her opinion or certain documents, and she's emailing and faxing this information over to Kathryn Scott at Monroe County Front of the Court repeatedly, and Kathryn Scott is repeatedly saying she hasn't received anything. So this happened at least 3 or 4 times in this set of emails in this like 1 month period. And there's more, I just don't have them in front of me, but she keeps going back and forth where I'm reaching out and asking if she's received it, and she keeps saying, nope, still haven't received it. Nope, still didn't receive it. And then I go back to Charmaine and she says, yeah, I sent it. And then that's when I started carbon copying Charmaine in every email. Anytime I needed her for anything or any other strange situation going on, I carbon copied her every single time going forward from that point forward. So this goes on numerous times with Kathryn Scott acting like Charmaine's not sending her the information, and she is. And then she just keeps acting like that she didn't receive it. So then this one is dated Monday, September 12th, 2022 at 2:52 p.m. Good afternoon, Ms. Scott. I was having trouble with my scanner this morning. And I think part of the problem is like I didn't have my internet hooked up yet, or maybe I just got it hooked up. There was an issue with me sending it. So I then went to the UPS store and faxed everything. And they were having trouble with the fax. And then I tried faxing from my chiropractor's office, and the service he has there for his fax line, it's slow, which actually I already knew that from a previous situation from years prior. This is where I stopped what I was doing, and I went in person to the front of the court, and I showed up at the window, and I dropped the entire 33-page packet on the desk, and like 10 different court employees were staring at me, giving the dirtiest look to me through the window, basically because my mother had been repeatedly calling them once I said who I was. They knew who I was. And my mother had been calling with all these delusions, telling them all this bullshit about me, and everybody there was believing it. So everybody there is participating in the crimes, operating on the delusions, acting like I'm really a mental disorder drug addict. So I walk in there and I smack 33 pages down on the desk. And then she goes on to tell me that she checked, and that like there was no 33-page document at the window or in the fax machine. How ironic, right? So they're over here getting rid of all the documents. So it's been faxed, it's been emailed, and it was dropped off in person. And here she's acting like she never received any of it from me directly, and then separately from Charmaine, same thing, acting like we're not sending her any of these documents, and they are completely getting rid of, they're tampering with the evidence and getting rid of it altogether as if we never sent anything. So yes, the Monroe County Front of the Court needs a full investigation as well. Kathryn Scott needs to be charged and arrested for her role in all of this. Because again, my daughter is 20 years old, not graduated. She should have graduated in 2023. 2023, yeah, that's when she should have graduated. So now we're going on 3 years ago. She should have graduated. Now, okay, so this also talks about the type of documents that I had sent in that 33-page packet, talking about our medical records, which ones we did have, the receipts to our treatments, and I believe Charmaine's documents were in there as well. And then it says, after speaking to my chiropractor that I've had for 22 years, that day I spoke with him, and then speaking with my dad the day prior, it was clear that my ex had not been parenting my daughter whatsoever, and that he had been handing her over to my parents so that he may do as he pleases, and that she gets to do whatever she wants, and my mother's able to continue to control the false narrative with the police departments, family, neighbors, etc., present herself to have custody of and raised her, and then as she's done all these years, and that my daughter and my dad are then brainwashed with the delusions about me and the reality The situation is like not at all anywhere near anybody's mind. They're all just on complete delusions, and they pass them on to my ex, who then and they all repeat the delusions amongst themselves, basically. In which Charmaine has seen this as well. It's like a sick delusional game of telephone they play. So she's watched this happen. And it's very clear that my father believes him and my mother have the final say when it comes to my daughter, and the friend of the court is irrelevant in their eyes, and they have custody of her, and they get to do whatever they want with her. And especially because they have the backing of the Brownstown Police Department, believing the delusions and participating in the repeated kidnappings. So that's what it says in that document. Then this is the outcome. This is what the outcome is of after she received all these letters, all these notices. I'm not going to read the paper. We each had to fill out a paper asking specific information about who does this, who does that, who's done all this all these years, who does that. Obviously, it's me. I'm the one who's done all of it all these years. But I'm not going to go over all of that. It's just extremely, it's taxing. It's very intricate. There's a lot of information. I'm sure most of that information is in everything I just read. So I'm not going to go over that. But I'm going to read what her outcome and what she wrote after she gathered all this information. So this is dated 9/21 of 2022. And it says custody worksheet. This is signed by Kathryn Scott, friend of the court representative. And it says Part A. They want to know who is better suited, or who's been the one providing all these matters, or who's better suited to care for these matters for the child in question, which is my daughter. So it says A, the love and affection and other emotional ties existing between the parties involved and the child. This factor focuses on the emotional bond that already exists between the parent and the child. And then Kathryn Scott wrote that the father does all that, and that she's closer with the father. Okay, those are delusions. Those are lies and delusions. This can all be proven. There's many people who can verify this. So B, it says the capacity and disposition of the parties to give the child love, affection, and guidance, and to continue the education and raising up the child in his or her religion. She puts the father. Now, my daughter attended a Catholic school and catechism for a while, and it was actually me who did all that, and I'm the one who took her to school the entire time she remained in school, her entire life. And it even states that in the Gibraltar police report right here, with Officer Seifert backing it up, stating that the ex needs to return the daughter to the mother because clearly he can't get her to school, and he never did in the past. The mother did her whole life. So that can all be proven, but Kathryn Scott writes here, more delusions. And then it says Part C, the capacity and disposition of the parties involved to provide the child with food, clothing, medical care, or other remedial care. She put equal for that one. And it's still not equal because I've literally done 100% of that. D, the length of time the child has lived in a stable, satisfactory environment and the desirability of maintaining that. She put the father. More delusions because I've done 100% of that and he's done none of that. E, the performance as a family unit of the existing or proposed custodial home or homes. This factor focuses solely on the performance the permanence of the family environment, not the acceptability of the home or the child care arrangement. She puts the father. Still more delusions. F, the moral fitness of the parents of the parties involved. This factor evaluates the parties' moral fitness only as it relates to how they will function as a parent, and not as to who is the morally superior adult. She puts father. More delusions. You see why I said I might throw the phone? Okay. So then she writes an entire delusional report as well to go along with it, which is dated September 20th, 2022. And it says a de novo order was entered on July 27, 22, referring the issues of custody and parenting time to the friend of the court for an investigation and recommendation. The friend of the court shall facilitate renotice of matter for review hearing thereafter. The order also adopted the referee recommended order of May 10th, 2022, which ordered father has had and exercises physical custody in fact. Mother shall have parenting time consisting of every other weekend from Friday after school until Monday morning when school begins. Father shall recognize and fully support mother's right to contact the minor child. She is 17 years old. The parties have another child together, who is 5 years old. There is no case, no court order regarding him, and the father states he sees him every Saturday overnight, and he will not be considered in the recommendation as he is not a child of this case. And then it states for me that I want sole custody, which I'd had her entire life. So at this point, she's past 17. She's almost 18. She's like 9 months from turning 18 at this point, 8 months. And it says father can have her every Saturday night with the younger child, and that I've had no parenting time with her since all of this. And that's because of the Brownstown police and the kidnapping and my mother's crimes. It has nothing to do with anything other than that and how all this even got to this point. It states that I have numerous medical conditions. I'm a patient at the Oxford Center where we're undergoing hyperbaric oxygen therapy, which we have been doing for years, and that I also see Charmaine. But she leaves out the fact that Charmaine's involved due to the crimes and the delusions and the chaos and everything that's going on, the destruction and everything going on. She's leaving that out. She's making it look like I have a mental disorder, not that I had to bring her in because of all these crimes and all the chaos and the problems. And I needed somebody to legally document it. She states that, she's talking about me, state that my house was in the epicenter of the Ford gas leak in August 2021 and said I made my medical condition worse. It has nothing to do with that. We were already living in a medical emergency, and we can't have any particles, chemicals of any kind, toxins of any kind, our brain tissue's open. We're still repairing the initial brain injury, sealing the initial brain tissue shut. And that we had been doing that for years leading up to it. It's not my medical condition was made worse. We're living in an extreme emergency, fighting for our lives. So she, minimalized what was going on here, and just like reworded things to make it look like I'm just crazy. And it was so bad, she just had to move to Ohio. So if you watch that video where the police are not returning my daughter, those words kind of come out of my dad's mouth in that manner as well in that video. But that's my mother repeating the delusions to him. And then it states that I stated my mother's tried to take over my life and that she has inserted herself into all my medical records without my approval. And she states that she has portrayed her as having a mental disorder and drug problem and has told false stories to local police departments, and that my mother has gone so far as to kidnap my daughter and hand her over to my ex, who will not give her back. So it's not she's inserting herself in my medical records. She's pulling other staff aside while she was an employee and falsifying the medical records and telling them that's not what's going on when we have no contact, no relationship for decades. And those are delusions, and she's getting others to enter false information into our medical records. Not that she's inserting herself in medical records. She's getting others to enter false information. So she twists everything that she says in all of this. And it states that I submitted my daughter's attendance history from 2021 to 2022 at the Gibraltar School District. And again, it states in there from Officer Sievert that the daughter needs to be returned to the mother, and because she's been truant the entire year and the father's not getting her to school. So then she leaves all of that out in this right here. She states some of the documents that I submitted or whatever. It's funny because she claims she didn't receive any of them, but then she states that I submitted some documents. She didn't state all of what I submitted to her. And then she just writes this negative stuff about me. Then it states that, so it says my ex states he wants custody of my daughter and that my daughter and I do not get along, and that he has had to leave work to go to my house numerous times because the police had to separate us. And he states that my daughter refuses to see me because he is certain that she will run away from my house if she's forced to go there. That sounds delusional. That is extremely delusional. And again, we've got many people who can back up that those are delusions. So then it states that I have not tried to see my daughter at all since the court hearing and only called once about her braces, and I would not let her leave to even go to a friend's house. And that I drive my daughter crazy with my medical issues, and that my condition is what drove us apart, and it's all in my head. So those are my mother's delusions. This woman wrote this report. Kathryn Scott wrote this report off of all my mother's delusional phone calls. That's 100% how this was written, because I know where each piece of information came from. Now, this can all be proven. None of this was ever in my head. I won't let her leave to go to her friend's house. Excuse me? She had 5, 10, 15 friends staying here at my house for about a year prior to that gas leak. They were partying it up in my house. Even during COVID, had a bunch of parties during COVID. And then she had a best friend that was living here for a year, and she regularly went to that friend's house as well. So those are actually my mother's delusions about what she used to do to me as a minor. Not what I've done to my daughter. Many people can verify that. Those are my mother's delusions. So then it says that my ex has never seen any proof of my medical condition, and that I'm an entertainer and work only on the weekends, and that he has my son every Saturday night so I can work, and that I only want custody of my daughter so she can babysit for my son. And he also has never witnessed any medical conditions in my son, and he comes over to his house every weekend and plays like a normal child outside. Okay, so those are my mother's delusions. That's my mother who told this woman all of this. Because during the time that the spills were going on, my son almost died twice going with his dad and him allowing him outside during it. And that stating that I only wanted to watch my son. I'm the one who raised her. She's been with me her entire life. At this point, she's almost 18. So that's my mother stating that, because that's also the delusion she was repeating to my daughter to make sure she would scream the delusions at me over the phone so she wouldn't have to come watch my son during the gas leak. But there's many people who can verify all of this. So these are all delusions. My mother's calling this woman regularly. The woman writes this entire report on everything my mother said to her over the phone. I don't know if those calls are recorded or if that's something that's able to be found by the FBI, if you're able to like hunt down landline phone conversations through the court. But I own my mother's phone number in the phone line, so you don't need a warrant to get that, because I can hand that over to you willingly. So if that's something that can be found, that's something I would like to be found, because I can promise you all of this came from my delusional mother's mouth. These are her words, word for word. And then it states that my ex said that my mother is a sweet, quiet lady and she's not crazy, and all of my daughter's friends love her grandmother. And my mother told him that in the past, that my mother and I have had some problems. No, those are my delusional mother's words. We've never had a relationship. There's never been contact. She's a deranged lunatic who's been getting away with decades of crimes. So if you watch all my videos, you're going to hear me say it just like that. And so if my ex actually stated something like that, he's extremely delusional, which we already know there's an issue with him living in reality. So, I mean, I guess a good point to start would be, why doesn't the FBI pull him aside and see if he's actually made any of these statements? We could start there, because you really think he's going to admit to all of this? So it says that my daughter's not attended school because I will not agree to put her online, which is what she wants to do, because we have joint legal custody and I will not change anything about it. The school won't do it without my permission. So nobody read anything that I've been writing all along, that she forced me to put her in person and played all these narcissistic games, and my mother kidnapped, and the police are involved in the chaos and the crimes and the conflict and every single problem. So she twisted everything, wrote an entire false report, all these delusions. This entire page was written on nothing but my mother's delusions. Kathryn Scott, you belong in prison, lady. I know you're retired. I found out you retired last year. So hopefully the feds find you for what you participated in, and why I have a 20-year-old daughter who's not graduated from high school, you stupid bitch. Now, I will be back with more. I told you I was going to get pissed. Bye.